welcome back to our channel. Some $quarter-dollar coins are worth hundreds. Don't miss these hidden gems. Like, subscribe, and find treasure in your spare change. In the midst of everyday circulation in the year 1994, as cashiers handed back change and vending machines swallowed quarters without a second thought, the United States Mint was operating at full capacity. It was a typical year for American coinage, with millions of quarter dollars struck in Philadelphia and Denver, carrying the familiar visage of George Washington on the obverse and the enduring heraldic eagle on the reverse. Nothing about that year's minting operation stood out to the public. But buried within those seemingly ordinary rolls of coinage, a singular anomaly quietly slipped into the economy. An error not immediately noticed, not immediately understood. Not until much later, when someone, somewhere, began to sense that something about their pocket change was off. It wasn't in a bustling coin shop or at a grand numismatic convention that this particular coin began its fateful journey, but in the quiet hum of a basement hobbyist's workspace. The collector, a seasoned enthusiast named Leonard, had long nurtured a habit of sifting through circulated change in search of overlooked marvels. A pastime fed by patience, passion, and a flicker of hope with each new batch. One evening, under the stark glow of his magnifying lamp, he casually rolled a quarter between his fingers. At first glance, it seemed like any other, a bit worn, the rim nicked from years of service. Yet there was something subtly inconsistent. The coin's edge didn't feel right. The reading was uneven, less pronounced. His fingers paused. He turned the coin obverse side up and drew in a breath. Leonard squinted, then reached for his loupe. The date read 1994. The mint mark, a small P for Philadelphia, appeared in its usual position. But there, on closer inspection, a chilling realization crept in. The relief on George Washington's profile wasn't sharp. The motto, "In God We Trust," had ghost-like duplication. The entire image seemed shadowed, as if another version of the design hovered just beneath the surface. It was no trick of the light. This was a double die. Double die errors occur during the hubbing process, when the coin's die is imprinted with the design. If the die shifts between strikes during this process, it results in a doubled image on every coin it subsequently strikes. These aren't coins damaged by circulation or wear, they're born flawed, stamped by the mint itself. And such flaws, when subtle yet significant, become treasured among collectors. Leonard had seen images of such errors before, often featured in auction catalogs with jaw-dropping final bids. But never in person. Never in his own hands. His mind raced. Could this be authentic? Could it really be a 1994 double-die quarter? It wasn't listed in the usual catalogs. No prominent entries under 1994 quarters noted such an error as common. But then again, that's what made it compelling. The thrill of potential discovery coursed through him. He took meticulous photos, emailed known experts, submitted the coin for grading. Weeks passed. The response came, confirmation. It was, indeed, a double die error. Verified and encapsulated by one of the nation's most respected grading services. Only a handful of such coins had surfaced. Leonard's was among the finest known. Word trickled out slowly through collector forums, whispering of a 1994 quarter with mysterious duplication. Early sales among collectors placed tentative values at a few $100s, then surged past 1,000 as images circulated and the error was recognized as rare, not simply damaged. The coin had traveled under the radar for years, perhaps decades, until Leonard's discovery shone a new light on it. What once clinked among soda machines now demanded glass cases and velvet trays, and yet, the coin's journey didn't stop there. The excitement over the double die was soon met with another, even more curious revelation. In analyzing additional examples from the same year, a secondary error emerged, this time not related to the die, but the planchet itself. A batch of 1994 quarters had been mistakenly struck on planchets intended for foreign coins. Slightly lighter in weight, these planchets were never meant for U.S. currency. A remnant of the mint's contracted production for overseas coinage, some blanks had been erroneously fed into the presses alongside standard quarter planchets. The resulting coins bore all the markings of a 1994 U.S. quarter, but felt lighter in hand, and rang with a subtly different tone when dropped. This twist sent shockwaves through the numismatic community. It wasn't just one error anymore. There were two. Independent, but possibly concurrent. A double die error, already rare, and a planchet misfeed, even rarer still. In an industry where layered minting errors exponentially increased value, the notion of a dual-error coin from an otherwise uneventful mint year was electrifying. Leonard, now recognized in forums as the accidental pioneer of this error type, was approached by major dealers. His coin, the original double-die quarter, fetched interest from private collectors willing to pay upwards of $12,000. But Leonard, ever the historian, declined the offers. He wanted to understand the full story before parting with it. Meanwhile, the market began to swell. Coins previously dismissed as generic 1994 quarters were re-evaluated. Metal composition tests were performed on lightweight specimens. Microscopes focused on ghosted letters and shadowed profiles. Some quarters bore only the doubled die. Some only the wrong planchet. A few, the rarest of all, had both. These were dubbed ghost twins by collectors for their doubled imagery and spectral origin. The value trajectory took on a life of its own. From modest beginnings, the most pristine examples began commanding five-figure sales. One auction in Chicago listed a dual-error ghost twin quarter at a starting bid of $18,000. By the time the final gavel fell, it had climbed to an astonishing $36,200. The anonymous buyer later revealed themselves to be a prominent East Coast numismatist, who described the coin as a unicorn hiding in plain sight. The error's physicality was understated but mesmerizing. On the obverse, Washington's profile bore distinct doubling on the nose and eye. The Liberty inscription showed separated edges, most prominently on the letters B and E. On the reverse, the eagle's beak and wings displayed faint but unmistakable duplication. And for those on foreign planchets, a slightly off-metal hue was visible under bright light, a shade neither silver nor copper, but something in between. The weight discrepancy, sometimes as little as 0.3 grams, often required precision scales to confirm, yet it held immense significance. As Leonard pored over historical mint documents and contractor records from the mid-1990s, he uncovered a memo noting emergency planchet sourcing during a brief machinery failure at the Denver Mint. A shipment of foreign blanks had been held in reserve for just such circumstances. Though intended for a different denomination, a small run may have been used before the error was caught. The memo mentioned only that several operations were temporarily rerouted and retooled, offering a bureaucratic veil over what turned out to be one of the rarest convergence of minting mishaps in modern history. This was the twist Leonard hadn't anticipated. The mint had known something was amiss. Not in a conspiratorial way, but in the quiet, internal manner of institutions that process anomalies without public disclosure. It wasn't until collectors began piecing together the scattered evidence that the full scale of the error came to light. And even then, not all the mysteries unraveled. One final discovery added another layer to the story. A collector in Oregon stumbled upon a 1994 quarter with a third error, an off-center strike. Only about 5% off, but enough to skew the lettering and leave a crescent of blank space near the rim. This particular coin also bore the double die characteristics. Though struck on a normal planchet, it was a trifecta of minting mishaps. The coin was immediately submitted for auction and described as a masterpiece of mechanical misfortune. It sold $4.41000. The ripple effects were profound. Coin grading companies updated their records to include the 1994 double die quarter and issued new designations for foreign planchet strikes from that year. A small club of collectors formed around the anomaly, calling themselves the 94 Circle. Members shared findings, scanned eBay listings, and hunted estate sales for forgotten gems. What began as a whisper in Leonard's basement had become a full-blown movement, redefining how collectors viewed the subtlety of error coins. Today, the 1994 $quarter coin continues to circulate, mostly the ordinary ones, without a trace of error. But among them, a few remain lost in drawers, jars, or between couch cushions, holding secrets invisible to the naked eye. Each day, one might resurface, caught in the palm of someone curious enough to look a little closer. To see the shadowed letters. To feel the weight just slightly off. To hear the story echo in the coin's ring. For those in the know, the year 1994 will never again be remembered as routine. It will be remembered as the year the mint quietly minted a mystery, an elegant mistake that turned metal into legend. In the year 2000, the US Mint had just begun to reshape the way Americans thought about their coinage. With the 50-state quarters program well underway, it captured imaginations across the country as each new design brought historical icons, natural wonders, and state pride into the hands of millions. Though the program was still focused on honoring states alphabetically, with Delaware launching the series in 1999, no one anticipated that a quiet reserve in that very state would, years later, become mysteriously tied to an error coin carrying immense value. The Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge, a vast stretch of marshland and migratory bird habitat in Delaware, wouldn't see its design officially minted until 2015 under the America the Beautiful Quarters program. But that didn't stop a small number of 2000-dated quarters from slipping through the cracks, bearing strange combinations that seemed to pull imagery from the future and embed it into a timeline that hadn't caught up. In a quiet suburb of Illinois, an elderly woman named Rose, a lifelong bird enthusiast and part-time collector, was going through a small cardboard box of coins inherited from her brother. Most were old nickels, worn wheat pennies, and common state quarters. But one coin stood out, not because it was especially shiny or ancient, but because the reverse didn't match the rest. It was dated 2000 and bore the familiar obverse profile of George Washington, but the back depicted a serene marsh scene, complete with long-legged birds in flight and standing in water. She paused. This wasn't the design she remembered from that year. She turned the coin under the light and studied it further. It featured two egrets near a wetland's shore, their wings stretching skyward, surrounded by reeds and shallow water. The words, Bombay Hook, were inscribed along the top curve. Her confusion deepened. She'd been alive long enough to remember when Delaware's state quarter came out. It had a galloping Caesar Rodney, not this. And Bombay Hook hadn't been added to US coinage until much later, 15 years later. In fact, it didn't make sense. The date clearly said 2000. The mint mark was visible. The wear patterns looked consistent with age. And yet the reverse design didn't match anything listed for that year. She brought it to her local coin shop, where the owner assumed she had been misled by a novelty item. That was, until he looked closer. Under magnification, the coin didn't show any signs of tampering. It hadn't been altered or fused with another piece. It had been struck, in its entirety, as a single, authentic quarter. Intrigued and increasingly convinced of its authenticity, he advised Rose to submit the coin to a national grading and authentication service. She agreed, not out of any expectation of great value, but simply to solve the puzzle. The results came back weeks later, sending a quiet ripple through the numismatic world. The quarter was certified genuine and labeled a mule error, an extremely rare occurrence where two dies not meant to be paired together are mistakenly combined in the minting process. Somehow, a reverse die for the Bombay Hook design had been used with an obverse die from 2000, creating a hybrid coin that should not exist. Mule errors are among the rarest and most valuable of all US mint mistakes. Unlike double dies or clipped planchets, mules are the result of an internal procedural failure so severe that only a handful ever escape into circulation. That a Bombay Hook die, intended for a release 15 years later, could be present and used in 2000 baffled even seasoned experts. No official explanation was offered. Theories ranged from a die test strike made well in advance, to an internal mix-up where prototype dies were mistakenly stored among earlier tooling. But there was no precedent for a mule with a design that hadn't officially entered production yet. Collectors began combing through rolls of quarters with renewed purpose. Coin forums lit up with speculation and hope. How many of these mule errors existed? Could there be more? Or was Rose's coin a singular anomaly? In the weeks that followed the grading revelation, a second coin surfaced, this time from a man in New Mexico who had found it in a plastic container of foreign coins purchased at a garage sale. Like Rose's, it bore the 2000 obverse and the Bombay Hook reverse. Unlike hers, it was slightly off-center, giving it additional appeal. The appearance of a second specimen confirmed what many had hoped but few had believed. that this error was not a one-off. It was part of a tiny, unintentional series, its mintage almost certainly accidental, perhaps occurring during a late-night test run or an equipment swap. The mint remained silent, neither confirming nor denying the existence of the coins. No internal documents from that period indicated any sanctioned use of the Bombay hook reverse. This silence only deepened the intrigue. As news spread, collectors and dealers took action. The value of the coin began to rise rapidly. Rose, who had initially planned to keep the coin in a small glass case above her mantel, was approached by a private collector with an offer of $15,000. She declined. A few weeks later, the offer increased to $25,000. Still she held out, curious to see how far the coin would go in terms of recognition and value. Eventually, after careful negotiation and national coverage, the coin was sold at a prestigious numismatic auction for $71,000. The buyer called it the most beautifully absurd accident of modern coinage. What made the error even more compelling was the pristine condition of the few discovered pieces. Despite their age and time in circulation, they remained in exceptional shape. Experts believed they had been struck as part of a test batch and inadvertently released, likely through coin bags shipped to local banks or vending machine routes. Their rarity was indisputable. To date, fewer than 5 such coins have been verified by professional grading companies, each one examined with intense scrutiny and authenticated through advanced imaging, metal composition analysis, and die pairing. Physically, the coins exhibit perfect fusion between obverse and reverse. The Washington portrait from 2000 is flawless, with sharp details around the jawline and hair. The reverse, with Bombay hook serene wetland imagery, is delicately rendered, the feathers of the birds showing micro-level detail. There is no indication of tampering or die swapping post-mint. The metallurgical composition matches standard quarter specifications, with no discrepancies in weight or alloy blend. One coin, dubbed the Silver Swamp, has gained legendary status among collectors. It shows a faint die clash, where details from the reverse image are slightly imprinted on the obverse side, an additional layer of error that increases both uniqueness and mystique. This coin, discovered in Michigan by a high school history teacher who collected coins as a weekend hobby, fetched $89,000 in a record-setting sale. The teacher used part of the proceeds to fund scholarships for his students, stating, "A mistake from the mint helped secure futures." The origin of the error remains unresolved. Despite mounting pressure from collectors and journalists, the U.S. Mint has offered no official clarification. Some insiders suggest it was the result of experimental design storage, where future dies are sometimes prepped and shelved for future use. Others believe the Bombay hook die was mislabeled or mistakenly inserted into a press during routine maintenance. A few even speculate that a rogue mint worker inserted it knowingly, creating a rarity that would lie dormant for years before discovery. No matter the origin, the market for these quarters continues to strengthen. Collectors seek them not only for their value, but for the story they tell, a narrative of time distortion, human error, and numismatic mystery. The design, meant to represent a quiet place of reflection and natural beauty, now represents something more. It has become a symbol of how imperfection can create value, and how small errors can echo across decades. As the demand grows and additional examples are sought out, the coins now command top-tier attention. Grading companies have created a dedicated classification for the mule, and high-end coin dealers have placed bounties for anyone who can produce additional examples. Meanwhile, collectors from every corner of the country scour their collections, hoping they, too, might uncover a piece of history hidden in plain sight. The 2000 Bombay hook Washington quarter mule remains one of the most remarkable and mystifying errors in U.S. coinage. A rare anomaly born from an uncertain process, preserved through chance, and celebrated for its sheer impossibility. Its current value range, depending on condition and error prominence, falls between $40,000 and $90,000. And for those few who hold one, it's not just a coin, it's a chronicle pressed in metal, a glitch in the mint's great timeline, and a quiet reminder that even in uniformity, the unexpected can still emerge. The year 2015 marked a significant moment in the ongoing narrative of the America the Beautiful Quarters program, a modern extension of the U.S. Mint's mission to reflect the nation's heritage through its coinage. By then, the program had already highlighted numerous parks and historic sites, each coin a miniature canvas bearing stories of landscapes, people, and resilience. That year, among the various releases stood the Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge Quarter, a coin with tranquil beauty on its surface and an extraordinary story brewing just beneath it, minted to celebrate one of Delaware's most cherished ecological preserves. The 2015 Bombay Hook Quarter depicted a sweeping wetland scene, populated with graceful egrets standing and flying over the reflective waters. The design was elegant, minimalist, and evocative. But what collectors didn't know then was that hidden among the standard issues were a handful of coins that bore a deviation so minute, so deceptively subtle, that it took a patient eye and years of observation before their true value would come to light. It wasn't discovered by an expert. It wasn't unveiled at an auction house or coin convention. Instead, it was a quiet finding made by a retired postal worker named Arthur from Kentucky, who had spent decades sorting through pocket change and coin rolls as a hobby passed down from his grandfather. He wasn't looking for anything specific that day. He was simply pouring out a canvas bag of coins on his kitchen table, the kind of bag he picked up monthly from his local credit union. But as he separated quarters by year and mint mark, his eyes froze on a Bombay Hook quarter that looked wrong. At first glance, it was nearly identical to the rest. The birds were there. The marshes, the reeds, the inscription, Bombay Hook, all intact. But something caught the light in a strange way. The letters on the lower rim, especially around the phrase, E pluribus unum, had a ghost-like doubling. He flipped the coin. The portrait of George Washington had what appeared to be a faint shadow behind the profile, especially around the nose and chin. Intrigued, Arthur reached for his loupe and brought the coin closer. Under magnification, the doubling was undeniable. It wasn't machine damage or wear. It was clear, deliberate die doubling, a double die error. The feathering on the egret's wings appeared echoed. The eye of one bird looked doubled. The reeds cast ghost lines. Arthur knew he had something unusual. But rather than rush to conclusions, he documented the coin carefully, cross-referenced known errors, and, after a week of investigation, found that no major double die errors for the 2015 Bombay Hook quarter had been publicly identified. His heart raced. Could this be the first? He packaged the coin securely and sent it to a major coin grading and authentication service. The weeks of waiting tested his patience, but when the envelope finally returned, the label told him everything he needed to know. 2015 P Bombay Hook quarter, double die reverse, MS66. Not only was it authentic, but it was nearly pristine. The grading service even included a brief note, highly unusual doubling. Earliest documented example of this variety. The numismatic world stirred. Forums lit up. Collectors who had dismissed the America the Beautiful quarters as too modern to hold true value suddenly found themselves flipping through their collections again. Dealers scoured their inventories. Within a few months of Arthur's find, another quarter surfaced from a flea market in Pennsylvania. This one showed even more dramatic doubling, especially around the standing egret's beak and the surrounding reeds. It was purchased for $2,700 by a young collector and soon after verified by the same grading company. That verification opened the floodgates. Not in quantity, these coins were still few and far between, but in awareness. People now knew what to look for. Subtle doubling on the reverse. Light echoing on Washington's profile. Ghost lines near the inscriptions. Each example that surfaced told a slightly different story, and together, they painted a picture of a miscalculated die, likely introduced early in the 2015 production run at the Philadelphia Mint, but then, a twist emerged that none could have predicted. One particular coin, unearthed from a change drawer at a highway gas station in Nevada, bore the same doubling as Arthur's original find. But it had an additional feature, an obverse strike-through error. A fine thread or piece of fiber had been pressed into the coin during minting, leaving a shallow groove across Washington's cheek. That would have been unusual enough, but when weighed, the coin came in noticeably light. Upon further analysis, metallurgical testing revealed the quarter had been struck on a transitional planchet, likely meant for a foreign coinage batch. This combination, double die, strike-through, and wrong planchet, made the coin utterly unique. the coin community named it the threaded hook. By the time it appeared at a numismatic convention in Chicago, its legend had grown. Several experts agreed it was the only known example with that trio of errors, and its bidding war ended with a final sale price of $87,500. The buyer, a private collector with a focus on U.S. mint mishaps, reportedly said, "It's the kind of error you see once in a lifetime, if you're lucky." Following that sale, values of other 2015 Bombay hook error quarters began to rise. Coins that initially traded for a few $100s surged into the thousands. Grading companies added new labels, new attribution codes. Dealers began offering rewards for ungraded examples. Still, the total number of verified double-die Bombay hook quarters remained incredibly small. As of the latest reporting, fewer than 20 had been confirmed, and of those, less than a dozen held grades of MS-65 or higher. What made these coins especially fascinating wasn't just their rarity. It was how deceptively quiet their errors were. Not dramatic like off-center strikes or huge die cracks, but restrained, almost whispering their uniqueness to those who looked close enough. This was a collector's coin, a reward for patience and trained eyes. And the Bombay hook design lent itself perfectly to such mystery. The calm waters, the elegant birds, the peaceful landscape, it all felt deliberate, as though hiding something in plain sight. The mint never officially acknowledged the error. No production notes from the Philadelphia facility mentioned any doubling issues. No press releases were issued. The error coins were simply born, slipped unnoticed into the world, and left to be discovered by chance. Among collectors today, finding one of these Bombay hook double-die quarters is considered a significant achievement. Stories continue to circulate about near misses, collectors who unknowingly spent one, or lost it to a vending machine. These tales add to the allure, each one a reminder of how close the extraordinary often lies to the everyday. As it stands, the 2015 Bombay hook Washington quarter with confirmed double-die errors remains one of the most coveted finds of the modern minting era. With current market values ranging from $40,000 for lightly circulated examples to as much as $90,000 for top-grade, multi-error specimens, its presence in any collection marks a high point of discovery, rarity, and quiet rebellion against the monotony of modern coinage, and all it takes to begin the journey toward one is a glance at a simple quarter and a question: did that bird just move? In the year 2020, as the world faced unprecedented shifts and disruptions, the U.S. Mint continued its scheduled releases under the America the Beautiful Quarters program, largely undisturbed. Among the final designs of this ambitious and far-reaching program was a coin few anticipated would stir up such fascination in the numismatic world: the U.S. Virgin Islands Salt River Bay National Historical Park quarter. It was intended as a tribute to both the island's ecological richness and its place in pre-Columbian and colonial history. The reverse of the quarter depicted a red mangrove tree, roots stretching deep into the earth, branches wide against the Caribbean sun, a symbol of strength, resilience, and rootedness in heritage. But hidden behind this peaceful and grounded design was a quiet storm of error and intrigue. This wasn't the kind of coin you'd expect to ignite a frenzy. It didn't feature a dramatic figure on horseback or a war-torn battlefield. It was serene, botanical, minimal. Yet that stillness concealed one of the most baffling minting errors of the modern era. And it wasn't found in an auction lot or a locked safe. It was discovered by a middle school science teacher in Ohio named Calvin, who, between Zoom classes and online grading, occasionally rewarded himself with rolls of quarters from the local bank to unwind and hunt for interesting designs that he had gone through the motions hundreds of times before. He knew the expected characteristics of the 2020 Salt River Bay quarter: the clean outlines of the mangrove leaves, the gentle ripples beneath its roots, the clearly engraved U.S. Virgin Islands, and the year 2020 nestled just under the branches. But this time, something felt off. As he tilted one of the coins under the kitchen light, the leaves of the mangrove appeared thicker than usual, almost blurred. The roots, which typically flowed in smooth detail, had jagged shadows beneath them. He blinked, adjusted his glasses, and took another look. It wasn't just a bad strike. The doubling was unmistakable. The words "Salt River Bay" seemed echoed along the bottom edge. The lettering rippled slightly, as if its image had been printed twice in close succession. He flipped it over. The obverse told its own story. George Washington's profile looked strangely raised along the forehead and jawline. Tiny slivers of doubling lined his ponytail ribbon and the letters of Liberty. Calvin's heart began to pound. He had seen doubled dies before, but never on a coin as recent and pristine as this one. He brought the coin to his desk and magnified the details with a loupe. Every aspect of the reverse seemed to whisper duplication. The mangrove leaves appeared like a ghostly echo layered atop themselves, and the roots had almost a vibrating effect. He knew enough to recognize this wasn't simple machine doubling, which tends to appear flat and shelf-like. This was deeper. It had texture. It had character. Rather than rush to conclusions, Calvin carefully photographed the coin, documented its weight and dimensions, and submitted it to a professional grading service. The weight was excruciating. But when the results returned, they confirmed his suspicions. 2020p Salt River Bay Quarter, Double Die Reverse, MS67. The grading label alone was enough to spark waves of interest. Not only was the coin authenticated, it was one of the first reported double die examples for that issue, and in almost uncirculated condition. Shortly after, a prominent numismatic blog published an article about Calvin's discovery. That article led to a flurry of activity among modern coin collectors. Enthusiasts who had dismissed newer quarters as too ordinary for investment potential began digging through their collections, magnifiers in hand. A pattern emerged. A few more Salt River Bay quarters surfaced with similar doubling, mostly from the Philadelphia Mint. Though each one had unique nuances, stronger doubling in the leaves, more prominent shadows in the text, they all shared the same origin, but it wasn't until a woman in Florida brought in a coin to her local shop that the mystery deepened. Her quarter had more than just a doubled reverse. It also exhibited a misaligned die strike on the obverse, with Washington's image shifted several millimeters to the right, creating a crescent-shaped blank along the edge. This wasn't just a doubled die. This was a combination error, what collectors called a compound error, highly rare and extremely desirable. The woman had found it at a laundromat, mixed with coins she used to break a $2,000 bill. She kept it because it looked strange and assumed it was foreign. But under magnification, it revealed both the doubling in the mangrove's roots and the off-center strike on Washington's bust. That coin, verified and authenticated, sold privately for $68,000 within 2 months. The fascination wasn't simply due to the nature of the errors. It was what they represented. The year 2020 had been filled with uncertainty, and here was a coin, a symbol of rootedness and endurance, that had emerged from that time with an imperfection no one expected. It captured a moment in history, both socially and numismatically. For collectors, it became something of a symbol. A mangrove quarter, doubled in design, accidentally struck off balance, but still standing. Additional examples began to appear, each adding to the growing database of known variations. Some displayed only minor doubling, just in the word virgin. Others had much more pronounced doubling across the leaves and sky. The coins were consistently traced back to early batches from the Philadelphia Mint. Experts speculated that a small group of flawed reverse dies may have been used during a compressed production run, possibly during a period when staffing at the Mint was strained due to nationwide disruptions. These factors, combined with rushed quality checks, may have allowed several errors to pass through undetected. Despite the growing interest, only a limited number of these error quarters have been officially authenticated and encapsulated. Their values have steadily climbed as collectors recognize the scarcity and significance of the find. And with many of them likely still sitting unnoticed in change jars or car consoles, the chase continues. What makes these coins truly special is the subtlety of their rarity. They are not dramatic showpieces with massive cracks or missing layers. They require attention, care, and close observation. They reward the patient and surprise the unsuspecting. And they represent a bridge between the modern age and the classical ideals of collecting, when the thrill wasn't just in the purchase, but in the discovery. One standout coin, dubbed the Rooted Phantom by a community of collectors, became a sensation after it was auctioned with a perfect combination of errors, double die reverse, die clash markings on the obverse, and an unusually strong strike that made the details pop with startling clarity. That particular quarter, graded MS68, now resides in a private collection after a bidding war that pushed the final hammer price to just under $75,000. Meanwhile, Calvin, the teacher whose quiet curiosity started the entire saga, remains humble about the find. He kept his original quarter, declining all offers, choosing instead to frame it next to a short note for his students. It reads, "Even the smallest details can change the story." The 2020 U.S. Virgin Islands Salt River Bay quarter, particularly those bearing the rare double die and alignment errors, has firmly established its place in modern numismatic lore. With current verified values ranging from $32,000 for circulated but authentic double die examples, to $75,000 for pristine, multi-error specimens, the coin represents a reminder of how even the newest change in your pocket can hold secrets, waiting patiently for someone to notice.